Walk with me through the cellar door.
A storm is coming, Francis.
A portal to a more skeptical world.
Cellar Door Skeptics begins right now. Prepare for the revolution with your hosts, Christopher Tanner and Chris Hanna.
Oh, welcome to another episode of Cellar Door Skeptics. Thank you all so much for joining us tonight. We have an amazing episode planned for you tonight. It's gonna just be me and Hannah tonight. It's gonna kind of be a little bit like old times. Buddy was feeling under the weather, probably because of all of his COVID activities. But we don't know exactly why. But he was feeling a little under the weather, so he's taking tonight off. But here we are, Cellar Door Skeptics, coming to you live tonight. And without further ado, let's bring in my co-host, the Hannah of the Chris's, the one, the only, the engineering mechanic, the one that says he is the science freak, who actually combed his hair tonight for the show. Welcome to the show, my friend.
It's leftover grease from the work day. We went to Taco Tuesdays the moment I came home from work. So I didn't shower the moment I came home from work for the first time in probably 15 months. As a precautionary hazmat suit situation, we just clean off. And yeah, my wife was like, Tacos Tuesday, no shower, change clothes, we go now. And the girls were screaming and hangry. So that's what we did. And so I may look all dapper, but it's just extra coolant and machine oil that just got stuck in there.
Fair enough. Oh, well, tonight we have a pretty good episode planned for everybody. We want to remind everybody that we've joined Rogue Media Co-op, and you can find us over there as well. If you want to support their Patreon, you can support their Patreon as well, too. But I think the first topic for tonight that I wanted to cover is the shooting of an activist in the UK named Sasha Johnson. Mm-hmm. And I was a little surprised last week when Hannah sent me this this article, because I did not expect England to actually have a shooting at all. I thought that was a little crazy, but they did. They actually had somebody came into a party and shot a Black Lives Matter activist named Sasha Johnson. So I don't know if you've heard about this, Hannah, or not.
Yeah, I shared it with you. I thought it was a pretty big deal. So there's a couple of, I don't know if they're somewhat not really hypocrisies, but in the end, it's one of those things that you just wouldn't expect to happen in England due to this, the disarmament of the society. There are a few weapons that run around through this, why you hear things like the Paris shooting and stuff like that. So those kinds of things do happen. And so we kind of need to figure out how and why and what and where those weapons came from, which I'm sure the authorities are doing. One, because they have significantly stronger security apparatus in that country than we do here when it comes to facial recognition cameras and all that kind of stuff in the major metropolitan areas. Smaller density, or smaller, more highly dense metropolitan areas that are, even when you go to the rural area, it's still not nearly as much space. So it's just easier for them to monitor what's going on. Anyways, this woman was shot, and she is a forefront leader in the same systemic problems that exist in almost all what we would call Western society nations. Any of the, the G20 is what I like to say. Like any of the G20 states that are considered modern Western industrialized nations all run into the same issues as systemic racism. You see an invisible case system, blurred lines between those who have and those who have not. But there is eventually, if you back up far enough, a pretty big gap to the few that have and the many who have not. And so these are the same situations, the same things that they're fighting for. And, it's a great thing that this movement that started here in the United States made it over there, because it's going to do better the general structure of society when we start to realize that everybody deserves to have the same fleeting chances. This woman, Sasha Johnson, she sustained a gunshot wound to the head, and I haven't heard any update in her condition recently, but I don't know if there was an update that I hadn't seen. But just when someone says sustained a gunshot wound to the head and they don't say is deceased, like, first off, what the specifics of it, I didn't see where, what, how, grazing, major, but as far as I know, it's a pretty intense injury. So I don't know. I don't know. And then if you find out if it's a person who's attacking from the other side or not.
So right now, as of yesterday afternoon, the leading theory is that it's more of a gun problem with a gang in the area than somebody actually attacking her for her actual beliefs. Also, she is still in critical condition as of yesterday. So she's not dead, so that's obviously a good thing, but she is definitely still in critical condition. And the reason why it's important, right, is because she has been an outspoken member. She's ran for different political positions. She's part of the Taking the Initiative Party's Executive Leadership Committee. And essentially, she has this huge passion for, Black lives, right? And it's really sad because she's only 27 years old, right? And somebody shot her. Now, again, it may come to find out that there is more to this than that. But as of right now, they believe essentially that it was more of a gang-related type thing in response to the area than it was actually somebody attempting her life based on, her political positions.
It's kind of a sad thing when you see something like that. So, like, the gang violence and local violence and black on black and minority violence, all of those kinds of things are symptoms of the larger problem. This economic depression, it's suppression, oppression, all of those kinds of things drive the gang activity. And it's almost unfortunate that she, being a person who's trying to fight for Black Lives Matter, is if this was the case, it'd be a really sad situation where the people who are doing this stuff, the reason they're probably frustrated and fighting the system and disenfranchised is exactly the problem that she was trying to solve. And you know what I mean? It's like one of those sad coincidences if that's the case. And then, of course, if it's the case where that's being hidden, ulterior motives for someone who is trying to silence her voice, that would also be a clear indicator that they were trying to, silence something that is growing in movement. And I would hope that if something does happen, that she becomes a lightning rod that can maybe be a driving force, kind of like some of the police killings in the United States have brought people into the situation. As nobody loves to create a martyr, but when a martyr is created and it brings people together and we can kind of create some kind of moving force, sometimes people give their lives, and it does really mean something. And so if it's something with her situation happens, and maybe it'll give them some push. Unfortunate, but it'd be good that we can kind of get behind something like, look at this, we need to solve this.
Yep. And so I thought, on a positive side, why don't we actually focus for a few minutes on what the party that she worked for does, right? So essentially, they claim to be the blueprint for change. The Taking the Initiative Party aims to create real change in communities across the UK by setting the agenda in government. We want to do this by putting forth exceptional candidates who truly represent their communities, winning seats to create a parliament that actually looks like a society it leads. So essentially, we probably need a little bit more than old white people in office. Let's just be frank there.
Boris Johnson.
Yeah, and Donald Trump, they look alike.
This reminds me of some of the manifesto writings and things that they had created when the Black Panther Party was starting to try to become more of a political force. I mean,
Yep.
this is organized. This is way more organized, and I mean, this was like a kind of a declaration of intent, which is significantly further than Black Lives Matter movement is in the United States. In most cases, there are probably some more politically minded sections, but as far as the overall thing, this is great.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. And essentially, their goal is to answer some of the challenges that Great Britain has, which is probably a little bit more than what we do. We didn't leave the EU per se and have it impact us in the same way it has them.
It was refugee issues, significantly heavier refugee issues in Europe and in the UK and a variety of those places. I mean, like it would be like if some of the situations at the border throughout Arizona and Texas were essentially scattered and spread over the entirety of the United States, then we'd kind of have an idea of what's going on in some of those countries. So there's some of those areas, as far as minority groups and new people in the countries, are really starting to cause problems. They need to organize it, and this group sounds like they want to try to do it.
Yep. And essentially, their statement says that this was attempted murder, that there's 4 attackers, and they have arrested 5 individuals, 4 who were specifically the attackers on suspicion of attempted murder. They are kind of calling the police out a little bit for not bothering to do the investigation process for this. And they feel arresting these individuals on the basis and highlighting that they were carrying drugs with intent to supply is marginalizing what is going on here, right?
Well, yeah. Throw a bag of coke in the back of a trunk, and then this becomes gang related, not politically motivated.
Yes. And they feel because they're under pressure to produce results, they're basically making things up and kind of pushing things into the limelight that don't need to be. So that's pretty important.
What were the New York black gentlemen that were accused of something 5? The Central Park 5?
Yeah, Central Park 5.
Well,
yep.
That's something that they probably seriously have to worry about here. Is like, oh, we found, a suspicious vehicle with 4 suspicious men and 5 suspicious men and maybe some drugs. Got them. Case closed. Put them on the books. You know what I mean? Like, that's also a danger here, is that we look for swift judgment, and you could potentially run into something like that. That would be terrible. It'd be even worse than if it was just plain gang violence. It's just like framing somebody or just eating somebody with the system that they're fighting against.
Yeah. And that's what we fight against here in America too. So it's kind of funny because, we're seeing systematic oppression happen throughout the world. And the best part about this whole thing, if you think about it, it's not the best part, but the irony of this whole thing is that we came from Britain, and look, it's still happening in Britain. So anybody saying, hey, in America it's going to change soon, you can just look at Britain and see it's probably not. So we wish her the best of recovery, and we really do hope that she is able to survive this, because the tragedy, she's going to leave, her kids behind, and like just that in and of itself is horrible. It's very sad and tragic that whether it had anything to do with her political affiliation or not, that somebody should have to lose their life over that. So,
yeah, I don't know. If people just disagreed vehemently on topics, that's fine. But when the political violence spills over, blood for blood and those kinds of things, it ruins the discourse in some cases, except for your general support for some sentiments of anarchy and political revolution. And so, like, in some cases, as Jefferson said, the tree of liberty needs to be watered with the blood of patriots and tyrants. I don't think this is a case where that kind of violence is warranted, and I would hope that the people in England and Britain also would agree. Like, we can have disagreements, we don't have to kill each other.
Yeah, exactly. And that's just the sad thing, is that this stuff continues to happen, and I don't know. Hopefully we'll see some change here in the near future, and we won't have quite the digression that we're getting, from the police. The next topic that we have for tonight is one I actually watched the Senate hearing last week. Michigan has now joined the fight with anti-trans sports bills. And I don't know, Hannah, and we could I guess we could go into opinions and thoughts first before we get into the thing. But essentially what the bills have wanted to do, and I did not know this, but I actually found this out the hard way, is that these bills have started in other states and are now kind of spreading across the country.
Mm-hmm.
And essentially what they are is they're basically saying if you are designated biological boy at birth, you can only play in sports that say your biological birth is for boys. And same with girls, because they believe that boys are transitioning and taking over women's sports in Michigan. Now, I'm going to be honest. I was very hesitant to watch this only because these things bother me, and I get really angry pretty easily. And, during the workday, it's kind of like, do I really want this? I'm in the middle of working, but
I specifically don't consume this kind of story during the day. I will go do something else. I will pass the story on NPR, on NPR One or something. If it's something like this, if I find it because I don't need anything else to stress me out and get me more angry at work.
Well, what it was is they actually had the Senate hearing, and I actually they had it live because all this stuff's over Zoom now, so you can watch all these hearings. And before, nobody thought about it, but now it's like I just sit in front of my computer all day. If I need background noise, why not listen to the Senate hearing in the state of Michigan, which is not always good. And at first, I was really pissed off because of who they had on, and then all of a sudden, there's some of the Democrats, and there was a couple of ladies down there, and this one lady, she just kept throwing zingers back and forth at all these people, and it's just like, all right, well, this is 100% worth it. This is worth any anger and animosity I feel towards Republicans at this point, and it was pretty amazing. But essentially, what the bill wants to do is tell you what sports you're allowed to play in. And I guess I got to add this to the screen, don't I? I guess you can't see it. There you go. Now you can see it. And essentially, this bill, there has been roughly 35 bills that have been introduced in the United States. So how many states are there, Hannah?
There's 52 if you count the ones that aren't states.
Yeah. So over 50% of these fucking states have introduced this bill. And it's coming in an alarming rate because it's essentially targeting LGBTQ groups across the nation. And on top of that, it's targeting the children. So it's not like it's even just targeting an adult at this point. They're not going after children. And that was the whole crux of this thing, is they think that it is unfair that if a biological sex male starts to transition, that they should not be able to play in sports, even if they identify as a female. Now, if we go back to, oh God, this has got to be 4 years ago. Man, we're old. 4 years ago when we had Callie from the Gaytheist Manifesto on. I don't even know if she does that actual show anymore. She's on the other shows. But
yeah, I haven't seen that show listed in a while.
Where's Keith when I need him?
Yeah.
But either which way,
moved out of our general podcast zones from the back in the day.
But she came on and we actually had a conversation about trans athletes in sports. And the idea that anybody thinks that somebody that's actually transitioning, A, has it easy to be able to get into the sports, B, is going to perform just as well as any other girl. They don't actually understand the biological makeup of what happens when you start taking hormones to start your transition. Now, that doesn't minimize some of the women that are claiming they've lost to trans athletes. But again, there's so many variables that go into this, and we're talking it's fucking high school sports. Mm-hmm. And I want to be honest, if high school sports is what makes or breaks your career, or could make or break your $1 million success, we've got a problem. And maybe we need to, maybe we should just eliminate all sports. In my opinion, let's just eliminate any sports that create revenue. There you go. There's my hot take for the night. Fuck all professional sports. Fuck every fucking organization that wants to pay them. And we should immediately ban all of that stuff. And let's just help these other sports players become professional coaches and things like that. for high school. And then we don't have to worry about the competitive side of it.
I got an interesting twist on this. So before we get into like the debate, if we're even going to get into it, but before we get into like the physicality and the biological body makeup argument of this, why do you think these bills have spread like wildfire? What, like, I have a theory as to why they've been so popular and they've really been all over. And I'm curious what you think the reason they're spreading like crazy.
So 2 reasons. One, because of the Trump mentality, because it's a fear tactic. Like, but that's the easy answer.
Yeah.
The other one is because as trans people become more normalized in society, people fear what they don't understand and they don't know. People fear the fact that they're losing their space that they decided they created. And because I have a space I've created and I'm going to protect it with everything I can, that's one of the largest issues, in my opinion, is people actually giving over and understanding that, well, really, it's not your space. You're just using some area of it. And if we're going to be this exclusive about it, then we should probably talk about all these other issues that go along with exclusivity, right? Mm-hmm. And so people don't like to lose that little bit of privilege that they have, no matter who it is, whether they're poor or white. They don't want to lose that privilege. People don't like that.
Resistance to any kind of traditional change. Like they're changing the traditions, and that makes sense. My theory on this is that they tried the bathroom stuff, right? They tried it, and society was kind of like, no, you're pushing too hard. This isn't as weird. This isn't as big of a deal. And they kind of failed, and it got struck down just about everywhere while all of the court cases were being run out in most of the schools and the places all over the country. That all fizzled out. But here's a murky place that brings all kinds of weird emotions in. Let's see if we can get the trans stuff into sports, right? And so they want to try to discriminate in the bathrooms. It failed. All right, let's try sports. We think all the trans boys are just beating the hell out of all of our girl wrestlers, slamming basketballs into the face of all of our girl basketball players. And you start picking up on new things where fence line people were saying, well, yeah, I mean, let's say a boy is transitioning to be a girl, but he doesn't have the money. Like what Callie said about starting to do your hormones and everything. He doesn't have the money. He's poor. He doesn't have the money to start doing all of the full-on transitioning. And so he's just now taking on that gender role, that gender, and he is mostly biologically still himself. Now he's calling himself herself, you know, they, them, pronouns and all that kind of stuff. But she now hasn't changed physically as much. And so the people who are hearing this, boomers and the people like that, they're like, and they can't make that adjustment. And so the states and the conservatives tried bathrooms, it failed. The sports is something, hey, we can get some, you know, well, sports one to me is really important, but also way, way more important to middle America, to red-blooded football country, right? Like those people see sports as like the ultimate distraction from any kind of real world concentration of political endeavors and actual, you know, situational analysis. And so like sports is a huge deal to anyone in places that would really take this up as like a massive deal. Like, all these trans boys are beating up on the trans girls, because it's not the other way around. They're not worried about trans girls joining the boys basketball team and dunking on the boys. So this is specifically in the exact same direction as trans boys in the girls bathroom, trans boys in the girls baseball team. You know, that's where it's one-sided. And I think this is an evolution of all of those bills, and they're hanging out inside of a newly stuffed Republican judicial system filled with all kinds of Mitch McConnell appointees and a Supreme Court that's got 7-3 or 7, is it 6-3 or 7-2 now? I think it's 6-3. 6. But anyways, they're basically looking at, you know, conservative majorities in the entirety of the judicial system, aside from a few appellate courts. So like this is a chance where they took it. It's murkier, and I think they're kind of starting to build some momentum there. This is one reason why Michigan, being a gross whatever it is now, that I used to have a whole lot of pride, and it's harder and harder to watch the Michigan political machine and feel like it's any different from MAGA hat country in Ohio, where I am now. It's frustrating, man. I don't know where the union inclusivity world of, the workers song from the Dropkick Murphys went, but it's not in Michigan anymore. It just doesn't.
It's not.
It doesn't feel like it.
So I think you're right in the idea that they're taking this and they're saying, hey, we've had success here. We're supposed to push this forward. The whole point is, well, if I can draw some of the opposing side to my side because I'm creating a not politically aligned issue, because I'll be honest, like not all Democrats and liberals actually side with transgender people. Like it's a thing. Like we have tariffs. Tariffs are a big fucking deal. Especially in Michigan. And so I think there's some of that. Now here's the thing. So I'm going to ask you a question, Hannah, and because you didn't have to register at all with, I think it's the MHSAA is the
Michigan High School Athletic Association.
Yep. Did you have to register to say that you were a boy?
No, you had to sign the athletic code. That was basically it. But in there, you had to put your name and all that kind of stuff in there. So the school and the MHSAA would require that you either signed your high school athletic code or school code, but like you had to sign basically a thing that's saying like, I will do my best. It's like the Boy Scout duty honor situation. And so like you're saying, I'm going to do my homework and be a good student. But there was nothing in there that said my name as Chris, which could be a boy or female, was any one particular gender. Yep.
So now the MHSAA, I hate saying that because I screwed up every time.
The
but
long acronyms suck. Whatever.
Essentially, if you are a transgender athlete on either side, you actually have to petition to play in the identified sex that you want to. Right? You actually have to apply for that and get approval. Like it's not something that you can just go, oh, I'm going to do that. You can't do it. Tell me how many last year, and last year's probably a bad year, but we're going to use it anyway. Last year, how many people have applied for this?
I'm going to say for the state of Michigan?
Just Michigan. This is just Michigan.
Yeah. I'd probably under 50.
That's
my
definitely right. Because out of the history of this, only 10. And that's not just last year. That's the historicity of Michigan. 10 athletes have applied. Now think of that. Think of this. We are introducing a bill to deal with 10 people.
A problem that doesn't exist. Yeah. But it's all political positioning. This is marketing. We are in the middle of a marketing campaign for the next election. That's what this is. I mean, in all reality, it's like the transgender bathroom bill. There weren't a rampant series of cases of boys getting in there and diddling all the little girls. That wasn't the thing that was happening. It was a solution for a problem that didn't exist. The sports thing, boys are just rambling, just destroying women's sports. No, they're not. They're not. It's not happening. A lot of people are doing the transition process. One, they're probably dealing with things that are way more difficult than sports, and they probably can deal with those things before they're really concentrating on sports. I mean, it's just me. I'm assuming that that's truth, and if someone has evidence to blow me out of the water, I'm more than welcome it. But I would think that a kid that's going through a transition process is concentrating on life and happiness and health and emotions and medicine and treatment more than they are working on their 100.
You want to know what the kicker to this whole thing is?
What?
The MHSAA actually said this bill is unnecessary. So the leading authority on high school sports is openly stating this is an unnecessary waste of a time bill. And And during this hearing, and I'm dead serious.
That's awful.
So they had all these people that went back and forth, and we'll get into a few of them in a minute. But one of them, when they did their rebuttal, so what happens is they get their opening statements, whoever the witnesses are, whether they're pro or con, they come on, they give their statement, and then all of a sudden, after they give that statement, right, they get to have some rebuttals from only, it seems like, the Democratic side. The Republican side has zero rebuttals ever.
Their arguments are not particularly strong when they're returning an argument. They're good at making statements and then hiding under Mitch McConnell's desk.
Yeah. And the funny thing is, anyway, so the funny thing is during one of these things, and we'll go through a few of them because I watched the majority of it, but we'll go through a few of them in a second. But
okay.
Yeah, I torture myself for an hour and a half. But essentially, one of the big things that came out was multiple times is the MHSAA says, we don't care. This is not a thing. Please stop making this a thing. I mean, and that's without getting into the reasons why. But they're literally saying, and this has been saying for months now, this is not even like, this is not new. This is not like something that just came up in May. They've been saying, this is articles from March 15th, I found this, that they are literally saying they call the bill unnecessary. It is touted its own protocols that it says are working extremely well. And they have a policy that's been in place since 2012 on how to run Michigan sports for transgender athletes. And here's the thing. Before a student compete, the organization goes through school and medical records to confirm someone's gender, hormone suppression therapies, and all of that.
Over the last 5 years, only 10.
Yes, that's what I was saying. Like, just that number right there, you just want to sit here and go, again, it would be like if I were saying we should ban every handgun, and you're like, man, I don't know, like 10 people were killed. And like, well, 10 people have been killed in 100 years by a handgun. Do you really want to ban it? Do we need to put a legislation in? I know it's sad somebody got shot with a handgun. Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, that's right. I forgot. Over like 100,000 people die in America from gunshots a year. Anyway, but that's the thing is like, these people are putting a bill in place, unnecessary legislation. And where the fuck are my libertarian friends? Where are you? I don't understand what the hell happened to my libertarian friends, because to me, this is an overarching reach of government trying to import more fucking laws than we fucking need. It's silly.
Libertarians don't exist. They don't exist. they don't. They're they just don't exist. So like all of these situations where you see government stepping on general personal freedoms in of a group of people who the libertarians would be like, yeah, listen, we disagree with these people, but they deserve to have their freedoms too. The libertarians always side hard conservative. And so what the libertarians are is they like to say essentially that we are an independent Christianity, independent conservative party. Like they're not as, completely swarmed into the GOP mess. But I was trying to find the number of high school students there are in a year in Michigan for the MHSAA, but it's millions.
It's high.
It's got to be somewhere in millions. And
yeah, how about this?
So
this
10.
article said in 1 year, 800 girls competed in boys' sports, and under this new bill, if there is an alternative, girls cannot compete in boys' sports. Like, this bill actually is more harmful to women than it is helpful. Because, and there was a lady that was on the Senate committee, and she goes, look, I played on a men's basketball team. I dunked over these men. Yeah. This bill would prevent me from doing it because there was a women's basketball league. She's like, I was better. I played on the men's basketball league. That's what I did. Now you tell me why I should have not had that opportunity. So
don't
it's
threaten
insane.
The conservatives with a good time. Woman, go in the kitchen and cook some food. Like, you know what I mean? Like, all reality. My sister was on the high school wrestling team. There was a girl named Lindy Balchusitis. She was on my wrestling team in high school. She was a state qualified wrestler. She went to state. I didn't go to state. I was not that good. I was a little bit heavier than her, but she was a better wrestler than me. She could beat me wrestling. I got beat by a girl multiple times in high school with practice and sparring and wrestling. She was good, way better than I ever was at wrestling. I mean, it's not a very enjoyable feeling getting pinned by a girl, but I mean,
I
it's the
like
same.
it.
Not this way. Trust me. You're losing. You're getting your ego's getting smushed. I don't know. Maybe you are a bit of a masochist, but in the end, I don't know exactly what you have in your special drawer, if there's balls and whips and chains and mouth gags, but if that's true, to each their own. But in the end, when you're doing a straight up competition, it sucks to lose, and you bring a whole bunch of that other stuff in from society. Things have told you that girls are less strong than boys. Well, this was a girl who was stronger than boys, and I watched this girl beat boys that were strong and good all the time. Now, in that arena, conservatives are like, oh, good, she's strong. That's a strong girl. Good for her. Or in some cases, they were completely and utterly offended. But it's awesome that you see that something. But the flipping the coin to the other side, the social idea that men are stronger and bigger, and there are difficulties when it comes to that, because there is some statistical analysis that says that in some cases the girls are stronger and better. And those are, awesome cases where you see the girl go into the boys sports, on the boys baseball and stuff like that. In some football cases, you see the girls playing on the boys team in smaller schools and stuff, which is awesome. The other side is something that, a lot of people have issues with, but also it doesn't happen nearly enough to really be a problem. That's the big thing here is, like, if it was rampant that there were people exploiting the system, kind of like rich people in Texas. If it was rampant that there were people exploiting the system, then we'd be freaking out about this, right? But we got 10 people potentially who are maybe using that are maybe using this system.
So,
and that's it. I don't see the need for this bill.
There isn't. And here's the best. So the specialist that they had on, right? The first person they had was this guy named Dr. Hygart, I think is his name. He's out of California. He did a whole doctoral piece. Now get this. This guy wrote his doctoral thesis.
Oh, jeez. Wow.
On this per se.
That's
but
awesome.
not in the same way. He basically wrote it on the differences between boys and girls completely. Here's the best part.
Oh, like
his whole study in his
analysis or something?
Yeah, he did a whole analysis on why boys could be better, that they will beat a woman 90% of the time, hands down, yada yada yada. Like, he went through all these statistics. The first question that came out of one of the senator's mouths was, she goes, you keep talking about the difference between boys and girls, but you didn't mention anything about transgender students. Did your study actually include transgender students that were like boys to girls that actually competed?
Well, no.
Silence.
Because there were none.
Yeah, he didn't study that. They're utilizing a study, and this guy's just, I don't know why, he must be getting paid. There's no way why would a doctor ever do this if you aren't getting paid for this? Like, that's crazy to me.
You gotta remember that someone who writes their doctoral thesis and it gets cited hard, one, they're excited that their study is going to be used to create legislation or something. So they probably came in with a little bit of like an honest heart, or this is kind of a biased thesis from the start. This person went in saying boys are stronger than girls. I'm going to prove it. So we don't know exactly where that doctor is there. So, I mean, they're our doctor. They are an expert in their field. They may be the 1 or 2% of climate scientists who think everyone else is wrong.
Well, and essentially that's what it came down to. And that person was dismissed right away. There was another lady, and I don't have her name. I have to look her name up. But there was this other lady they had on as a witness. And this lady overtalked everyone. She was so passionate. She's lost to transgender men, and it's like, well, you're not actually saying this right. Like, every time you misgender somebody, all it does is make me go, you are less accredited. I don't care what degree, I don't care what experience you get, nothing. It's not misgendering them. At least genderize them correctly, and then we don't have to have this fucking problem. But this lady, and so what she was doing is she was using Trump tactics. She was like Rudy Giuliani in a female form. Like the senator would ask a question, she'd immediately interrupt and go, "Well, let me ask you a question back." And it's like, whoa, hold on a second. Like you don't get to ask the questions. You're on. You're the witness
forum,
here.
lady. Yeah.
And so like,
this is
I'll be.
forum.
My goal. My one goal I have is to see if that lady will actually join our show. Because oh my god, like we can mute her, we can do all sorts of things with her. It's like it'll be insanely amazing.
Dump it out. In all reality, that woman just being like that explosive personality, I am completely dead set in my mind, and there's nothing you can say, no way you can change anything ever. I am totally. I have been offended, hurt. I have been oppressed. I have been attacked. Whatever her reasoning is, like that person came in with a predetermined path, and there's no changing that. Even if you look at some of the other people who have done, speaking presentations for like the GOP, so like the couple that was stood out in front of their house with rifles, the husband,
whatever.
and wife.
I know who you're talking about. Yeah.
Yes. So that dude is running for office now.
Why? Because he's a white man with a gun.
Yeah, basically.
And a fat belly.
He's also just the fact that he stood out there and did that. He could be a complete sociopath, and if you talk to him, you want to hit him with a hammer. But he will get national support and shares and likes from people who are part of the Second Amendment gun right NRA thing that think that this guy was standing up for their rights, even though it's the whole thing was he was trying to protect his property, which is completely and totally in the end, it's going to be one of those things where there are people that are going to throw support to this guy just because he stood up to those Democrats and told them he doesn't want them on his property. This lady who was in the Senate in Michigan is standing up there and just spitting whatever nonsense back into the Democrats' face before they can even finish their questions. I guarantee this will get utilized and pushed for whatever media 15 minutes of fame it can, and if it turns into something, the GOP will take it in a heartbeat. They will not leave anything. The Bush legacy, no child left behind. Well, no meme left behind in the GOP. They can use any positive whatever they can, because I mean, when it comes to their arguments, it falls flat if it isn't viral. It doesn't stand up to scrutiny, and so in the end, they need big Trump theatrics over anything of substance.
Yep, and that's what this bill is. And folks, if this does not make you angry, if this is not, we can actually have an honest conversation about this if you want. This bill is not an honest conversation, and that's what is infuriating to me. And this is why I don't understand why people don't get more passionate about this type of shit. And like to me, if we took all these bills, and I'll be honest, you could put it on Democratic and Republican sides. Democrats introduce bullshit bills too all the time. But that's what we need to be doing, is going after these people saying, here's the amount of bullshit bills you listed. We're not going to elect you.
What do we call them? The Christmas bill?
Christmas tree. Well, no, those are fat bills. This is not a Christmas tree bill.
I mean. Yeah, but no.
This is just the bullshit bill. If we were in X-Wing, we would call this the Wedge Antilles bill, because everybody hates that fucking pilot in X-Wing because that dude just makes you do like all sorts of crazy shit you don't want to do. We call it everybody hates Wedge Antilles. But anyway, little Star Wars hate there for you. This is where legislation needs to come from. And this is if a candidate, I don't care what side you're on, if a candidate introduced this that said, if somebody is running in this position and they do not get X amount of votes or percentage of the votes, that seat remains open, period. And I don't care what it does to democracy. We would see such a flood of change. Like I'm talking like
rank choice or
no.
The minimum 50% runoff.
So think about think about it this way. So I got two candidates. I got a Republican and a Democrat running in Ottawa County for the Michigan Senate seat, right?
Yeah.
And I'm going to say, I don't like Gary Peters because he introduced this many bills, and I don't like Schumer. I can't remember the guy's name off the top of my head. But whoever the Republican was, and I'm not going to vote for either of them, so I don't vote. So they go, out of X amount of votes, these guys got less than 20% of the votes. Neither of them get the seat.
Then you rerun the election or something.
We either rerun the election or you have an open seat. If we started doing these type of things, you would change politics instantaneously. And fine, fuck the federal level. Let's just do this at the state levels for now. You would literally start changing things so fast because you'd have all these open seats. Government wouldn't get done. Then people would complain. And then it's like, okay, well who are we going to put in these places?
Threshold? Like somebody has to get 50% and then like over 50% and they essentially get the position.
I don't have an opinion right now on a percentage per se, right? Like I'm not going to, I would have to go through the numbers and look at statistics and averages. But like in my world, I'm saying is like some of these people get elected in certain counties because they're the only Republican running, right?
Oh,
and 50% of the populace don't even vote. They're just like, whatever. Like, I'll be honest, like my city council stuff, I don't vote for that ever because I don't know who any of these assholes are. And I know if I did, if I could ever find the research, none of them support what I support. So I have nobody to vote for. I just don't.
That's one
so
of the
who do you vote
I,
for?
I mentioned
I wrote my wife in this year. She was not happy. I
really enjoyed the absentee ballot. I really enjoyed that because I sat down with my wife. The two of us conversed about all of the people that were running, all of the positions. We did research. We found out who's done what, who is where. And like, if it's a name on there, okay, we went to their page. We went to their Facebook page. We went to whatever page that explained who they are and why they're running for whatever their position is. And in some cases, it was just one person running and it's just an R or a D next to their name. And that's unfortunate and that's frustrating. And that's one thing that it really needs to get changed. That's one of the things that the Republicans did very, very well is they found a lot of those things when we talked about the Republicans working on the congressional seats and everything. They went into places that were uncontested and then they put a bunch of money into it and flipped the seat really quickly. Those kinds of things, local politics aside, are really important. And I would love to see more people spend more time on that. But I like the idea of what you're mentioning. So it's like what they did with the Georgia runoff recently was that if there's 3 or 4 different parties and nobody hits the 50% threshold, then the two highest run again against each other for the special election. And then that is those two, because there's only 2 solutions, one of them has to get higher than that 50% threshold, or use the rank choice stuff, which is something that's been happening in New England. And that is where you vote 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, however many people are running. And the people who have the most positives come in. And so I don't know if there's a benefit to having an open seat, like there's just no vote for that area. And so a party would really try to find somebody that can, be considered viable. Or would it be better to have the ranked choice voting so you get the most positive person as opposed to the person who got the most number ones or whatever, which, a couple of different layers there. I would really be interested in some of the political philosophy behind those because my friend on Facebook all the time talking about ranked choice and how it's so great in New England. I haven't really seen a lot of like revolutionary things coming out of that though, because like New England is kind of, it's not really that unexpected when you see a lot of blue.
It's just all it's doing right now, Hannah, is allowing for more minority parties to have a larger say than they normally got. But in the long run, it's actually it's creating a very minute change. I think ranked choice voting is something that should be mandatory, period. But the problem I have is that we're still stuck in this 2-party system. So no matter what, those are going to be the 2 choices. Yeah. But like in my world, every Republican libertarian will be at the bottom of the scale every single time. Like it's just going to happen. Like are you pro-life? You're going to the bottom. Are you pro corporations getting tax breaks? You're going to go to the bottom. Oh, you don't want to have any government regulation? You go to the bottom. Like I don't know. Like I'll take the crazy anti-vax lady over you.
This directly ties into my quick save tonight. It's a really cool conversation that I saw online of basically someone proposing the core tenets of conservatism, and I thought it was really cool. So we'll talk a little bit about our quick saves. Mine's kind of long, but we won't go through the whole thing. But like a bunch of those kinds of things are some of the assumptions that liberals and progressives make about the Republican Party. And so I don't know. I'm curious to see what happens in the future, and if we see any court rulings that'll kind of slow or stem the tide of the LGBTQ sports non-issue that has been made into an issue, but it's actually a political rally cry and some serious momentum. I'm curious to see if that gets stemmed by our court system, or if it has been pushed hard enough to the right that they won't stop it, and these will stay law as they get appealed. It'll be unfortunate.
At least in Michigan, we have more of the Senate than we did before, and the House than we did before. So I'm not as worried about it in Michigan, but we'll see. So the last topic I want to talk about is the idea of university, and this kind of goes into this belief system, right? And we talked a little bit earlier, Hannah, about, you asked me the question of why do people not want to give up this core ideology? Well, conservatives on their basis essentially believe in conserving how things happen the way they should happen with minimal change. So they want to make micro changes, whereas somebody like me wants to make macro changes aggressively. And somebody like Hannah is like, well, we need to make aggressive changes, but not as fast as Tanner wants them, because we're just going to end up with tire fire all over the United States, which I'm okay with. Let's burn everything down. But
isn't the semantics of like conservatism essentially that things were better in the past or things were better recently, and so keeping that,
yes,
or like conservatism essentially is physical manifestation of cognitive bias. Like we only see the things that made us happy, and those are the things that I remember from my past. Therefore, we should do the things that we did in the past, even though I'm ignoring the majority of the non-positive hits that I'm currently.
Yes, absolutely. And if you think about it, like if we talk about it on a psychological basis, right? Like I listen to certain bands that I find appealing from my youth. Hannah probably does too. I know for a fact Hannah does. No, you do.
I am so. No, I was thinking about this the other day. I was like, I tried my best to keep up with music, and I failed.
And what's the one band you go back to? It's a go-to band for everything.
Instantly, Fear Factory.
Exactly.
Fear Factory is the band. Like they basically broke up recently. They're done for. I don't see them ever getting back together because Dino lawyered everybody into oblivion. I honestly, it's sad, but like, let
a good thing stay, right?
You know what I mean? I just, like some of the other metal bands that I like them. I still listen to them here and there, but like that's the only one that I can flip to, and it's just like, never a question. That's always an enjoyable experience. Bands like Static X and stuff, they're not around anymore. It's unfortunate, and Wayne Static and everything is so like that kind of stuff. But like, I don't know, the one that I always go back to is Fear Factory. Then Green Day, I guess that was like the first band that got me into. Well, it's the first band that got Green Day got me off of stuff like REM and I don't know who else is it, like Hootie and the Blowfish. My parents bought me when I was younger. Well, dude, I had no other music. I got those CDs when I was younger. My aunt bought me a Sheryl Crow CD. Like that was what I had. I didn't have anything else. And so I'm listening to Sheryl Crow and I'm listening to REM's Out of Time, Losing My Religion, surprisingly relevant. I never really had it, but still. But like like that kind of music stuff like that so you remember the positives. Like I remember a couple of those songs, and they're still not terrible songs. I didn't particularly like them that much. Alanis Morissette was interesting, and then all of a sudden like this punk world hit me, this pop punk Green Day world, and it led me into a whole bunch of worlds, and eventually I migrated into metal and stuff from a couple of guys on the wrestling team. Like you remember all those positive steps, and the idea of conservatism essentially is remembering all those good things and making rose-colored glasses to the history.
Yeah. So yeah, exactly, and that's the whole point. Like there is some things that should be and be allowed to be like that. So for example, mine is MXPX. Since quarantine, they've done I don't know, like 15 live shows. I've probably seen 8 of those. Probably between me and my buddy, we've watched 8 of them over the course of the year and a half now.
That's awesome.
And I've only seen them in concert twice in my whole life because they never toured over this way as much. But it's that nostalgia, right? And so the idea behind, what do conservatives want? Why do they want this nostalgia? And what is the woke culture doing? It's pushing these people's ideas out of different areas. So the first thing I want to do, and this article comes from a very conservative rag called The American Spectator, which we'll get into in a minute. And I know Hannah was going to say when he saw it. So I know Hannah knows this one. So that's kind of why, I wanted to do this segment. But
That's fine.
the ideology here is they talk about, right, what's the idea of a university? What's the idea of tradition? How do we educate ourselves traditionally? So, if you look up the Encyclopedia Britannica, right? University is an institution of higher learning, usually comprising of a college or liberal arts and sciences and graduate and professional schools, and having the authority to confer degrees in various fields of study. A university differs from a college in that it is usually larger, has a broader curriculum, and offers graduate and professional degrees in addition to undergraduate degrees. Although universities did not arise in the West until the mid-ages in Europe, they existed in some parts of Asia and Africa in ancient times, right? So, universities have been around for a long time, right? And so essentially this article is not written about African or Asian universities. It's written about Western European universities, because that's where people essentially believe white people somehow founded the ultimate knowledge truth that you can learn, because white people are the ultimate thing, nobody clip that. And because they're not. But anyway, they believe academia arose from specifically Western institutions, right? And I'm not going to say that Western institutions don't have a high, ability to want to, produce academic work or academic students and more intelligent beings. The problem becomes is that when we say it's only Western colleges or only Western universities and that's where everything originated from, we actually are suppressing and doing microaggressions against all these minority countries that have had studies similar to this for years and years and years before that. So just the idea that universities on a conservative side should remain like they did in the mid times, right? That is silly because they existed before that. and like anybody wanting to make this claim just doesn't truly understand where the history of universities comes from. So the idea tonight is to talk a little bit about what is a traditional university and should we remain the same? Because that's what this article is essentially arguing. So this gentleman, Roger Scruton, which I'm sure Hannah knows very well, he shows up all the time. I did not know who he was, honestly, until this, but after doing a little bit of research, he shows up quite a bit. And this is a little bit of older article, and this kind of talks a little bit about where he feels the history for the idea of the university comes from, right? And he talks about how it kind of started in Catholicism, right? And it's shaping people's minds and in middle-class parents when it comes to deciding on their teenage child's future, entertain a picture of university life that is not entirely at odds with how they feel society was. So they feel society is this way. University allows you to become your own individual, but teaches you to live within the constraints of that, and truly misses what university actually does, which is educating people in multiple different facets to take that knowledge, compound it together, work with other people, and become more intelligent because of it.
Essentially trying to educate within the bubble. So his idea of university itself is education within boundaries. We'll let you learn. We're gonna put bumpers up on that bowling ball, right? We're gonna, you know what I mean? Like, we're gonna put bumpers up. You're not allowed out of this area. Could you bring up the definition that you had at the university there? Because so one of the things that you had in that original definition and is you see that the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences in graduate and professional schools. So this is something that I had really cool when I was in school, and the book, I have it up on my shelf right now. It's basically about liberal arts. And so the definition of liberal arts in the past and what it really means is significantly different than what we talk about being a liberal art as far as liberals, the progressive stance. Liberal arts itself is a traditional academic program in Western higher education. That's what it says there for the definition. But liberal arts takes this term from art in the sense that it learns skill rather than specifically the fine arts. So liberal arts education refers to studies in liberal arts degree programs, but also in learning itself. And so these are the kinds of questions they were talking in the ancient Greek methods of inquiry, which began a desire for universal understanding. Guys like Pythagoras argued that there was a mathematical and geometrical harmony to the cosmos and universe. So this guy is talking about, oh, this is this Catholic, this is this Christianic development. Sorry, guys, we were doing liberal arts way before the Jeebus was around. This is the Greeks and previous societies were looking for a universal understanding. They were looking for higher education. They had institutions all over the world. There were Mesopotamic institutions. There were Egyptian institutions. There were all kinds of different groups and places of higher learning throughout the world. The Chinese were brewing beer when they were writing the Bible in relatively non-literate memory phrases and things like that. Like in the end, what we were looking at is this guy is essentially what's the revising history. Oh yeah, it's like Texas history books, right? Like history just started when I said it started. And that's my most frustrating part with the American Spectator is essentially they love to pride themselves on a place of history and learning, yet they seem to omit huge portions of actual history and learning and immediately dismiss anything that existed before that. Almost like the idea of the monotheistic gods absorbing a lot of the paganistic gods and rituals to create their own religions. It's just a frustrating thing to see. So like the idea of the university itself being perverted by this particular instance and article, this guy taking an idea of learning, kind of a universal learning ideal, and just forming it, putting the boundaries around it, putting the bumper guards up so that he can get a spare when you really didn't deserve it. That was a gutter ball and you know it, bro.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the idea here, like you were saying, is that exactly that. And what they're trying to say is that there was some faults, right, in this method. They didn't allow women in, right? They believe there was a gap. But the author continues to talk about how a middle-class father is going to feel upset because he's spending all this money on tuition fees, which, by the way, I never got. Period. I had to pay my own tuition. Still do.
Yeah.
But his daughter...
The Republicans were like, yeah, the mediocre average income, like $150,000 to $200,000, $300,000 a year for a family. That's like totally like me, it's not a big deal, right?
Exactly.
Like,
and
what?
They essentially are saying that this father dwells on the fact that his daughter wasted his money because she got a degree in women's studies, right? Which essentially is against men because of the woke audience that is teaching this, and because he would rather see his daughter go on to have a child, have a family, make a sandwich in the kitchen. And the sexism in this article is just befuddling, right? Like, it's just like, you just sit here and it's just cringeworthy because it's like, I would never want my daughter to ever feel like that. Like, they should have to go procreate to be a productive society. Like, my one daughter wants to go to Japan and write anime stuff. Like, great. My other daughter wants to be a pet doctor, basically. And it's like, you should never, ever have to feel that you shouldn't have to get into, if you want to get into the debate realm and you want to get into women's studies, be a teacher, educate people, you should not feel that your degree is wasted because of my concept. Like, that's ridiculous.
Your only window into validity is through your uterus. I mean, are you kidding me? You know what I mean? Like, in all reality, that's what this article in American Spectator love to put out there. It's like he has an issue saying that you spend a ton of money getting a women's study degree. Okay,
So what?
And then he said, "Oh, you're never going to make any money doing that." We've highlighted an issue with our society. Why doesn't our society support women's studies professionals? Why doesn't our society pay those kinds of people well? Instead, we spend all of our money on, to an earlier gripe you had, professional sports and media and all that kind of frivolous garbage. Like, why don't we spend our money on these women who get degrees to help us understand the majority gender in our society? Oh, no.
Think about it this way, Hannah. Think about it this way.
You know
If
what I
we
mean?
took the amount of money that just Michigan spent in sports teams and reapplied it, so all those people get to make 80 grand to 100 grand a year. That's it. That's what you make. And we're going to take all the rest of the income. We're going to outrageously tax all these arenas, any of these other stuff. We're going to take that and we're going to reapply it to basically paying people that are in women's studies or minority studies to give online lectures or presentations for people to consume instead of all this sports crap. Can you imagine how educated people would be? And this is why this person's offended, because they don't want that. They feel the genuine basis is mathematics, science, which they're really ignoring in and of itself anyway, but mathematics,
And a variety
science,
of things, yeah.
English, these are the core academics we should be teaching, and all these pseudosciences are things we should be ignoring. And that's the insanity of this whole thing. It's just like, well, they're complaining about academic freedom, then they're complaining about the woke audiences that are coming in, and it's like, am I really that woke to just say, stop being a sexist pig?
Yeah. Well, one of the things that they have in here, it says in the article, in the paragraph that you have pulled up right now, it says you cannot, you cannot grant a university the intellectual freedom a scholarship requires. It is argued and also denied moral freedom that enables students to adapt through their own experiments and living. Freedom is indivisible. Without it, knowledge cannot grow. And so the argument in this is that by having the woke culture and having things like cancel culture, whatever, the idea that society is basically going to say, like, this is bad. We all kind of think this is bad. Most of us are like, yeah, this is bad. That's some kind of like oppression and cancel culture on philosophical arguments, and that colleges are places where you see things like groups that are underrepresented really finding their own footing and creating movements inside their universities. So one of the things you hear about a lot of times is that comedians don't like to perform at universities because they can't tell jokes where they can pick on one group or that group or this group or that group. And so you kind of have to have, the idea of individuality and kind of keep an eye on what groups and what people are being represented at the university. Well, that kind of tiptoeing around, hey, these are all groups that have an identity. These are all groups that demand a little bit of respect, and they probably haven't gotten a whole lot of it. It's really frustrating that we have to change our behavior, but they're also valid in the fact that they're saying, no, we don't want this kind of stuff to happen here. So this guy here is just a larger scale version of that. He's talking about universities as a whole, and he's talking about changing a traditionally white male oriented system, saying, listen guys, we're going to change a few things. And bringing back your perspective when it came to the sports stuff earlier, is that the white male is losing a little bit of his status, and he has to give it up in the idea of a zero-sum game, which is also ties into my quick save. In the end, like the idea that this is a zero-sum game, like this is a conservative thing, that's a massive deal, and that if they lose anything, if anything gets given to the other side, they lose. Not that, hey, we're all kind of agreeing and talking to each other. This is better for all of us. And university is a place where they really test that and they try all these ideas out, and that's threatening. That's genuinely threatening to someone like who would write this particular article here, which is steeped and comfortably steeped in its conservatism, saying that things were better through my rose-colored glasses of the past.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the idea behind this is, should universities stay the same? I mean, what do you think, Hannah? Should universities grow slowly? Should it stay the same? Should we create alternative ways for them? Because essentially this guy says we should go to online classes, but we should limit and do distant learning for only those who believe the same thing.
Yeah. In the end, I will let universities do as they have been doing, which is evolving significantly faster than the rest of our society. One, because it's a high concentration of young people, and young people don't give up what the system thinks in the majority of cases. Private schools and religious schools, that's a different story. But I'm talking publicly funded universities. I honestly think that these are, no matter what people do, the only thing that conservatives like the guy who wrote this story can do is try to put handcuffs and cages around public universities. If they defund them and destroy them, then there's a chance that they'll be able to keep their perspective and their political ideology and their little John Travolta boy in the bubble world together. In the end, the institution of a university as we know it, given general freedom to let people democratically decide what they like and don't like, even if it's against the tradition of history, it's going to be for the better, because that's where that's going to be the most aggressive. That's when most people are going to be analyzing and thinking about what our society is. It's going to happen in college. That's when I learned the majority of the things that I learned when it came to being awake and aware. I realized what an atheist was. I realized what politics was. I realized how much money I was losing by spending money in political tax spending and stuff. Like, why am I spending so much and other people aren't spending any? Like, all of that stuff happened in college. It's a wild awakening period. And then I would hate to change that too much. I really do think that it's a great thing. The problem is that there are people trying to just crush it for their own benefit and for their own political ideology's benefit. And given that free democratic state of college and university, I really do think it's it's a good place, man. I don't know. Like, you for most of your college experience was mostly distance learning on yours.
It was. And we argued, like, we did all these things together. Yeah. Like, it was never a safe space. It was
limited to class.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. And I got into some heated arguments once or twice, and
No.
Yeah, not me. I don't know, and it's a unique experience, I guess. But at the same point, as long as you were polite, like, you couldn't swear, you couldn't do any of these things, you could state your thing. Like, I'll be honest, like, it made doing the stupid comment, respond to somebody to get your daily points so much easier. Because if you posted a controversial thing, people responded to you and you just responded back. It was simple. Like, I don't know how people didn't exploit the shit out of this. Like, it was, to me, it was like, boom, 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 boom. I don't have to type on Facebook today. I will just do it on here. I don't know.
Yeah. I don't know. So, like, being a student athlete and being involved with, like, the kind of people that would be considered conservative throughout the entire thing, being the black sheep and all that kind of stuff, but experiencing, like, the culture, it was awesome, man. And so, like, I was in a small school in a relatively rural area, kitty corner to Saginaw, Michigan, which is like the birthplace of the Pinto or something like that, like the Ford Taurus, or that Ford Tempo or whatever plant was building the ex-American car thing. And so like seeing like all of the bits and pieces and the remnants of American modernization and the industrial fall of our planning and stuff, it was a really interesting place to get a degree. And I would recommend it to everyone. I mean, like, the university experience it's one of those things that it's hard to describe, but I can really see why it's threatening to a lot of people. Having gone through it, it is threatening to the political conservatives' perspective. Like, it is. Like, it's so open. I don't know. It's just really experience. It's a good experience.
Yep. And I think next week what we can do is I don't want to cover it tonight because I really want Buddy to be a part of this discussion, but we could talk about next week about how do we not eliminate that conservative voice? How do we not isolate or alienate those type of peoples? Because my opinion's a lot different than probably your guys's in the fact that I'm openly punching Nazis and saying fuck conservatives. But anyway, we'll talk about that next week. I'll add that to the agenda for next week. I think that'll be a good discussion point next week or two. So, on to the quick say. So this week, and I won't lie and tell you if you cry a little bit, it's not my fault. But my quick save this week was because we had a family pet die. And I think the harder thing really is not actually that, because personally the pet in of itself was not like, it was a guinea pig, right? You know, but it's the fact that your daughters have to go through this, and it's like, you just want to protect them. But I think, you know, so this article is one of those things where it's like, hey, how do you have a conversation as an atheist? And, you know, it's not funny, but it came up, you know. My daughter pulled me aside later when we were hanging out. And she was like, hey, well, I get to see Snuggles in heaven. It's like, well, if you believe in heaven, honey, then you do. Well, do you believe in heaven, Dad? No, I don't. I don't believe in that at all. But this article kind of summed it up greatly because I had to like Google this shit. Like I'm sitting here Googling, what do you tell a 10-year-old when their pet guinea pig dies?
I've looked this up because of my dog. She's 9 now, and we're getting close to the time when I'm going to have to explain it. This is no joke, man. You got to be prepared.
Yeah. And I think, you know, like this one was a little bit unexpected. The guinea pig was 5 years old. So, I mean, it had lived a good guinea pig life. You know, like it had,
I don't know what that life expectancy
is 4 to 6 years. So, you know, I mean, it's not unrealistic. And in fairness, like we got them from one of those pet stores, and that's probably not the place you should get them from, and this and that. But lately, the girls have taken to their guinea pigs a little bit more. Like we have little carrying things. My one daughter carries the guinea pig around the house. Fortunately, not the one that died. You know, she didn't love that one as much as she loved the other one. But so that's going to be even harder when that happens. But it's kind of like we were out there and we did a ceremony type thing. It's like, you guys want to say last words? You can throw the dirt over the box. We buried it in the backyard with all the other dead pets that we've had. Like I have my first dog. We buried him when he passed 3 years ago.
Yeah.
And, you know, my friend, she's like, well, I don't own a house. Can I bury my cats at your house? So, like, I have a couple of dead cats buried in my house. Like, yeah, I have a little pet cemetery. By the time I retire, I will probably have, I mean, I have 2 dogs now. One of them is 5.5 years old, and the other one is 3, you know. So neither one of them are on the verge of it. But, you know, again, that will be a discussion that has to happen. And so the whole thing here that we had to have is that it was, you know, the idea that you cannot physically love them anymore does not mean that you can't love them in your heart.
Yeah.
And that memories last forever.
Yeah.
But that's just one of those things. It's just, you know, it's always a challenging thing to have that conversation. And it's funny because I hate religion to some extent so much. And you never realize how much of a crutch that is, you know, especially growing up, because it's just easy to say, well, you'll see them in heaven again. God's taking care of them. You can hear those things and they're comforting because you believe that at some point you're going to be there. Yeah. And it's funny because people want to bitch about atheists being, you know, these bullshitting, you know, horrible people. But it's like, we actually have to deal with the reality that there isn't an afterlife that we see. Yeah. And that we don't want to accept some BS for anything else. And having that conversation, like an honest conversation with your child, is a lot harder than I ever thought it would be. You know, like when the dog died, my first dog, he was 14 years old, I think, maybe 15. He lived a long life. He had pancreatic issues. We used to inject him with insulin every day. You know, like he lived a good life. He should have been dead 7 years well before he was dead. You know, but it's still like, where are you going to ever see this dog again? Well, no, I'm going to see him in my Facebook memories, shittily enough. Like, I keep Facebook around because I get to see memories of my dog, you know? But other than that, you're not going to see the dog again. I have a little thing I get to keep, and, you know, it'll be awesome because of that, and it is what it is. But it's just, anyway, it's one of those things, like, for me, even though it's kind of sad, this was my weekend, you know? We had to deal with this on Friday, or Saturday. So,
yeah. I mean, it's one of those things where you're like, you feel a connection to the animal, you lose the animal, but then like you feel the loss and the connection with your daughters, and like their pain is your pain. And people that haven't had kids, it's kind of hard to understand specifically what that feeling is, but it's intense, man. And so like, I don't know. It's one of those conversations that the pet loss is important because it helps kind of do like a test run and a dry run for explaining how humans pass away, because that can be traumatic. Like there are like grief summer camps and stuff for like grandparents and uncles and aunts and family members that pass away. Like that is just intense. So
yeah. And can you imagine, like, you know, like we had this whole COVID thing, and it's like not everybody takes it as seriously as everybody else, and like people in my family didn't take it as seriously. And can you imagine having to go to that funeral and be like, yeah, they didn't take it seriously and they're not here anymore, you know? Like, yeah, it's just, death is a shitty thing all around, you know, and it's something I've never handled as an individual very well, personally. Like, it's not, for me, it's not an easy thing. And you know, like the concept of hell, that was always the hardest thing about religion. It wasn't that God didn't care about me. It's that I don't want to burn eternally, and I don't want anybody I know to ever have to suffer because of that. Yeah. Like, that was the hardest part of getting over religion. But having to have those conversations with your children, it's like, there are things that have to happen. You have to have those conversations at some point. It's going to happen. And, you know, I'll be honest, I was a little unprepared this weekend, but, you know, this blog and a couple other blogs helped, you know, work through some of that with talking points. So, what was your quick say?
One of the speeches we did was secular parenting. So this is a good example of something you kind of be prepared for secular parenting. So my quick say, if you scroll down a little ways, unfortunately the original comment got destroyed, but if you see it right there, up a little, it said hijacking the top comment. So this was a comment that was originally the next one down from that red boxed one. There was a comment that was made on Facebook or on Reddit. Essentially, it was by a guy named Knives with like KNI7ES. So like an interesting way of spelling knives. Anyways, he talked about essentially the question is that why Democrats make the GOP spell out what it is for and what it's against, and how there seems to be a disconnect when the Democrats just get just strategically slaughtered regularly over and over and over again. The comment specifically, and I will I included the link in my quick save, but I'm saving this text and I'm actually just put it out onto our blog because it's really useful. So what it does is it talks about it's a meta problem the liberal leftists and Democratic Party have a huge problem with, and they literally can't understand the Republican Party because they don't behave like we would do on a very fundamental level. So the issue is that and a lot of times like liberal pundits and people would point out like X, and then why Democrats or why Republicans do Y. And like X is directly hypocritical to Y. Why would the Republicans ever support this? But they find their own way through cognitive dissonance and whatever. And it actually explains later on that using things like cognitive dissonance and explanations like that, all it does is really create like an aggressive, angry armchair diagnosis that will make an enemy of a conservative for the rest of your life. And so this guy, basically his perspective, he said that he is hypothesizing that Republicans and conservatives in general are not fully honest with themselves or others in what they believe. Yet they possess a fully fleshed out belief system that is self-supporting based on unspoken assumptions they cannot articulate except through euphemism. This is one of the reasons why when you look at some of the interviews that you hear, Jordan Klepper will go to a Trump rally and ask people to explain what they're thinking. And it's like listening to a 2-year-old tell a random story. Like, what the did that person just say? This is what they're talking about. And so in the end, this guy's level is the hierarchy is natural, inevitable, and desirable. And we live in a zero-sum world. So those two things. So like there has to be a hierarchy, essentially a pyramid of people who are at the bottom, slowly working their way to the top. And you have to fight, bootstrap, pull yourself up. You're sick, be healthy. You're poor, don't be poor. It's like when South Park told Sparky not to be gay. Don't be gay, Sparky. Don't be gay. Right? Like in the end, you're basically telling someone, don't be a thing that's bad. Only be things that are good. And this is how you become top pyramid. And essentially that is zero sum, meaning that if you get to the top, you've got to knock someone. So in the end, though that perspective there was significantly, and so you work your way through the rest of the comment section, but this comment was so well made and so clear and concise and enjoyable that I saved it, and it was deleted by the original poster because either it got way too much attention because it got a lot, and they were just like, screw this, I don't want anything to do with this, probably because MAGA country descended upon their post, because of course in the end like it's just like changing the perspective. So like when liberals and progressives think of the Republicans, we think abortion and guns. Well, maybe it's a little different. I mean, those two things are incredibly valid, but they fit inside the framework of that pyramid and of the idea of a zero-sum game. So I thought it was really intuitive. So maybe we could reevaluate the categories that we put conservatives into to try to maybe understand them and stop losing to them every election, because it's coming. 2022 is coming, and I swear if we sit on our asses, we're going to get hammered. We're going to get so hammered.
We might. You never know. So, all right. Thank you all so much for joining us tonight. We've had an amazing show with Mr. Hannah and myself. We will be back next week, Monday evening, with a special guest from Rogue Media Co-op. I don't know how you say it, but that's what we'll be back from. Bothers everybody.
Up in his base.
There you go. All right, we'll be back next week with another amazing episode. Make sure you like, subscribe, and join us over on Patreon if you want to be part of the show. Thanks, and have a good night, everyone.